The music played softly as the church doors slowly opened. All eyes turned to the entrance. And then, silence. The bride stood there, glowing like the morning sun, her gown flowing like a waterfall, her poise and beauty leaving the entire room stunned. Gasps echoed through the pews. It wasn't just her physical beauty, it was something deeper: grace, confidence, a quiet power. No one expected this. Not from her, the same girl they once called plain, the same girl who was laughed at for not being bride material. But here she was, walking down the aisle like a queen. The guests couldn't stop staring. Her skin glowed, her natural hair styled like a crown, her steps calm and steady. Some people leaned over to whisper, "Is that really Zuri?" Others simply blinked in disbelief. Phones came out, pictures snapped. This was a moment they never saw coming. In the front row, her parents sat frozen. Her mother clutched her purse tightly, her father's jaw clenched. Their eyes followed her every step, but not with pride, more like disbelief, maybe even regret. They never believed in her. They never imagined this would be her wedding. Not in such a grand church, not with such an elegant setting, not with such a handsome groom waiting for her at the altar. But it was happening, and they were just guests in her moment. The groom, Tajuddin, stood at the altar, wiping away a tear. He had seen her beauty every day, inside and out. But today was something else. This was the moment he had dreamed of, when the world would finally see her the way he always had. His eyes didn't leave hers. He didn't care about the crowd. All he saw was his bride. Zuri didn't rush. She walked with calm grace, head held high, eyes focused straight ahead. Her heart beat fast, but not with fear, with power. She remembered every cruel word, every time her own parents called her too dull, too dark, not pretty enough. Every time she was told she'd never be chosen. But now, all of it was behind her. She had chosen herself. And today, she wasn't just being chosen by a man, she was being honored by the world. As she reached the altar, the pastor whispered, "You look radiant, my child." Zuri smiled. She didn't need anyone to tell her anymore. She already knew. The crowd stayed silent, still absorbing what they were witnessing. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a full circle moment, a quiet, powerful victory. And as the ceremony began, no one could take their eyes off the bride. Zuri grew up in a big, beautiful house filled with expensive things, but no warmth. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Nwankwo, were well known in society, always throwing fancy parties and keeping up appearances. But behind the walls of their mansion, they barely spoke to Zuri unless it was to correct her. She was dark-skinned, had a small gap between her teeth, and her hair was thick and coarse. Her mother often sighed when looking at her, calling her too plain to be noticed. "Why can't you be more like Chica?" she'd say. Chica was her older sister, light-skinned, always dressed in perfect clothes, with long straight hair and a charming smile. Their parents adored her. She was the pride of the family, the daughter they showed off. Every compliment, every bit of attention went to Chica. When guests visited, they called Chica the future bride and ignored Zuri completely. Zuri would sit quietly in the corner, her hands tucked under the table, pretending not to care. But inside, it hurt. At school, it wasn't much better. She was shy and kept to herself. Other kids didn't bully her directly, but they didn't include her either. She started hiding behind books, drawing in the margins of her notebook, and writing little poems only she would ever read. Her parents never asked about her hobbies, never praised her for her good grades. All they cared about was how she looked. And to them, she simply wasn't enough. The only person who saw her was Mama Ijoma, her grandmother. She lived in a small house at the back of their compound and always made time for Zuri. Whenever Zuri felt invisible, she'd go sit with Mama Ijoma, who would braid her hair slowly and tell her stories from long ago. "You are not plain, my jewel," she'd whisper. "You are deep like the ocean. People just haven't learned how to swim." Those words stayed with Zuri longer than any insult. One day, when Zuri came home from school with a certificate of achievement, her mother glanced at it and said, "That's nice, but it won't make you pretty." Zuri didn't cry. She just quietly folded the paper and placed it in her drawer. She was learning to keep her feelings hidden, to smile even when it hurt. Years passed and nothing changed. Chica was taken to salons and photo shoots. Zuri was left behind, but in her quiet world, something was growing. Strength, creativity, and a deep understanding of who she was. No one saw it then, but one day they would. Zuri sat on the edge of her bed, watching Chica twirl in front of the mirror. Their mother had just brought home a new designer gown from Italy, silk, lavender, and covered in shiny stones. Chica was glowing with excitement, her face already touched with the soft shimmer of professional makeup. Their mother clapped her hands proudly, telling her how stunning she looked, already dreaming about the compliments they'd receive at the upcoming family wedding. Zuri stood quietly in the doorway, wearing a simple cotton dress she'd worn many times before. She hadn't even been asked if she wanted to attend the wedding properly. She already knew her role: carry trays, stay out of the way, smile politely, then disappear. On the day of the wedding, the family house was filled with guests. Laughter echoed, music played, and the scent of expensive perfume filled the air. Chica walked in like a celebrity, cameras flashing, everyone admiring her dress, her beauty, her charm. Aunties and uncles praised her, calling her the pride of the Nwankwo family. Zuri stood in the corner, holding a tray of small chops, walking carefully through the crowd, trying not to bump into anyone. She wore a dull uniform the event planner had handed her. No one recognized her as the daughter of the house. While taking drinks to the guests, she walked past a group of young men, laughing together. Among them was Kelechi, the boy Zuri had secretly liked for over a year. They had exchanged books once, and she'd thought maybe he saw something in her. She smiled shyly and offered him a drink, but Kelechi chuckled, leaned back, and said loud enough for the group to hear, "No thanks, I don't want the help falling in love with me." The group laughed. Zuri's smile froze. Her hands trembled as she turned and walked away. Her heart felt like it had been stabbed. She headed to the photo area where the family was gathered for group pictures. As she stepped forward, hoping to stand beside her sister just once, her mother quickly pulled her aside and hissed, "Stay back, Zuri. You'll spoil the look. This photo is for the family." Zuri's chest tightened. The photographer waited awkwardly. Zuri slowly stepped back, hiding behind a pillar. The camera flashed again and again, and she wasn't in a single shot. Later, Zuri sat on a bench behind the venue, wiping her eyes. Her makeup, though light, had smeared. She stared at the stars above and clenched her fists. She had tried to be quiet. She had tried to be good. But now, something inside her had changed. She swore, right there under the open sky, that she would become someone they'd never laugh at again. Someone unforgettable. Zuri stood quietly at the airport, holding her scholarship letter tightly in her hand. She had been accepted into a top university abroad to study architecture, a dream she had nurtured in silence for years. Her parents barely showed emotion. Her father nodded once and said, "Make the family proud, but don't expect us to find you a husband when you return." Her mother added, "Just focus on your books. That's what you're good at." There were no hugs, no tears, just cold instructions and a driver to drop her off. When she landed in the new country, everything felt different. The air was cleaner, the people smiled more, and for the first time in her life, Zuri felt like she had space to breathe. At first, she kept to herself, still carrying the weight of years of rejection. But as time passed, she began to open up. Her professors praised her ideas. Her classmates admired her quiet strength. She started dressing for herself, wearing bold colors, and letting her natural hair grow freely. She began journaling every night, writing notes to her younger self, healing old wounds with every word. She joined a women's group on campus that focused on self-love and mental wellness. Slowly, Zuri began to see herself differently. Her dark skin no longer felt like a curse. It felt like royalty. Her gap-toothed smile became her signature. She began walking taller, speaking clearer, and believing in her own worth. Her confidence grew not from makeup or approval, but from knowing who she truly was. One day, during a school exhibition, she presented a design inspired by her grandmother's house in Nigeria. After her talk, a man approached her. He was tall, warm, and kind-eyed. His name was Tajuddin, a Nigerian Ghanaian student studying business. They talked for hours about home, culture, dreams, and healing. He didn't try to impress her. He simply listened. He saw her, not just her beauty, but her heart, her mind, her soul. Zuri was shy at first, unsure how to handle real kindness, but Tajuddin never pushed. He made her laugh, encouraged her work, and reminded her daily that she was enough. Their friendship grew slowly into love, not the flashy kind, but the deep, calm kind that wraps around you like a blanket on a cold night. For the first time, Zuri felt truly seen, not as a disappointment, not as someone who needed to change, but as a woman with value. Years passed, and Zuri graduated top of her class. She looked in the mirror one morning and barely recognized the girl she used to be. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had turned it into power, She was ready to return home, not to prove anything to her family, but to live on her own terms. Zuri stepped out of the car in front of her family home, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. Her posture was calm, graceful, dressed in a simple cream dress, her skin glowing and her natural hair wrapped in an elegant bun. She looked nothing like the girl they used to ignore. As she entered the house, heads turned, the chatter faded, even the staff paused. Her parents blinked, trying to hide their shock. Her mother stood up slowly, adjusting her wrapper, as if unsure whether to hug her or not. "Zuri," her father said, his voice uncertain. "You look different." Chica, sitting on the sofa, gave a tight smile. Her once glamorous appearance now seemed tired. The spark in her eyes had faded. She barely looked up from her phone. Her husband was nowhere in sight. The cracks in her perfect life were showing. Zuri smiled gently and greeted everyone. Then she turned to the man beside her. "This is Tajuddin," she said warmly. Tall and confident, Tajuddin greeted the family with respect and kindness. He spoke in a calm, deep voice and instantly earned the attention of the room. Her parents stared at him in disbelief, especially when he said he was a business consultant with plans to expand into West Africa. Dinner was set outside under the garden lights. As they ate, the tension was thick. Chica picked at her food. Their mother asked awkward questions about Zuri's job, trying to sound interested but unable to hide the discomfort. Her father kept sipping his wine, only speaking when necessary. Then, as the plates were cleared, Tajuddin stood. Zuri looked up at him, confused. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box, and got down on one knee. Gasps filled the air. "Zuri," he said, looking only at her, "I've known since the day we met that you were my peace, my home. Will you marry me?" Zuri's hands flew to her mouth, eyes wide with joy. She nodded through tears. The garden clapped, but it wasn't full of excitement. Her parents clapped slowly, stiffly. Her father forced a chuckle, saying, "Who knew this one would bring home such a catch?" Her mother added, "Are you sure you're ready for her quiet ways?" The comment stung, but Zuri didn't flinch. She looked at Tajuddin and smiled. He took her hand and kissed it gently. Around them, the night felt magical, even if the love wasn't shared by all. But Zuri didn't need their approval. She had already chosen herself, and now, someone truly worthy had chosen her too. As the wedding preparations began, Zuri felt the atmosphere in the house shift. There were smiles, yes, but they didn't reach the eyes. Her mother gave short instructions and barely included her in decisions. Chica, always hovering nearby, kept commenting about how small the wedding would be. "Simple suits you, Zuri," she'd say with a fake smile. "It's not like anyone expects luxury from you anyway." Behind closed doors, the bitterness grew. One afternoon, while Zuri was out meeting with the caterer, Chica cornered Tajuddin in the living room. She wore a low-cut dress and leaned in too close. "You're too fine to be tied down," she whispered, placing a hand on his arm. "Are you sure you don't want something more exciting?" Tajuddin calmly removed her hand and stepped back. "I didn't fall in love with excitement," he replied. "I fell in love with peace. Zuri gives me that." Chica's face darkened. She stormed off, slamming the door behind her. That evening, Zuri's mother made comments to family friends who had come to visit. "Zuri doesn't like attention," she said loudly. "So no big venue or expensive decorations. She's always been simple." The guests nodded politely, but the undertone was clear. This wedding wasn't meant to shine. When it came to the gown, her mother insisted she'd handle it. She hired a cheap local tailor with a reputation for last-minute disappointments. "No need to waste money on glamour," she said. "It's not like people are coming for a fashion show." Zuri, trying to keep peace, simply agreed, though something felt off. She began to notice the tension, the tight smiles, the half-finished tasks, the way her mother avoided giving her updates. But Tajuddin had seen enough. Without saying a word to Zuri, he made quiet calls. He reached out to a trusted designer he knew abroad and had a custom gown designed. Elegant, soft gold, detailed with hand embroidery that reflected Zuri's heritage. He arranged for it to be delivered discreetly, knowing the truth would only hurt her. Zuri sensed something wasn't right. Chica avoided her eyes. Their mother was oddly quiet, and no one talked about the gown. Still, Zuri stayed calm. She focused on the joy ahead, the love she felt, and the man who stood by her side through everything. What she didn't know was that someone was already turning her simple wedding into something unforgettable, because she deserved nothing less. The sun rose gently over Lagos, casting a warm glow across the garden venue. Flowers bloomed around white chairs, and soft music played in the background. Guests arrived, dressed in bright lace and bold colours, whispering about how quiet the bride's side of the family had been during the planning. No one really expected anything grand. Some even joked that the wedding might be as plain as the bride herself. Then the music shifted. Heads turned toward the entrance. There she was. Zuri stepped forward slowly, dressed in a breathtaking gown of soft gold and ivory silk. The fabric shimmered under the morning sun, hugging her perfectly and flowing like a dream behind her. Tiny hand-embroidered symbols from her Nigerian roots danced across the hem, telling a quiet story of strength and beauty. Her makeup was soft, just enough to highlight her natural features. Her hair, full and natural, was styled in elegant coils that framed her glowing face. But more than anything, it was her calm, radiant smile that took everyone's breath away. People stood. A quiet gasp spread through the crowd. She didn't look like a different person. She looked like herself, but free. No fear, no shame, no need to impress. She walked like someone who knew exactly who she was. Graceful, confident, whole. Chica froze in her seat, her mouth slightly open. She gripped the armrest tightly, eyes locked on Zuri's every step. She had spent her whole life shining alone, but now the spotlight had moved, and it wasn't coming back. Zuri's mother blinked rapidly. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her father cleared his throat and shifted uncomfortably. For once, neither of them had anything to say. Their daughter, the one they had called plain, quiet, not good enough, was now the center of every eye in the room, and not for being flashy, but for being powerful in her softness. Tajuddin stood at the altar, his eyes filled with tears. He watched her approach with a look that spoke of deep love and pride. To him, she wasn't just beautiful, she was everything. When she finally reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "You are perfect." Zuri smiled, not because she needed his words, but because she knew they were true. The ceremony hadn't even begun, but everyone already knew. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a silent, stunning victory. The girl they once overlooked had arrived, and she didn't need anyone's approval anymore. The reception hall shimmered with warm lights and soft music. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Guests chatted happily, still whispering about how breathtaking Zuri looked. But the real surprise hadn't come yet. After the couple's first dance, Zuri stepped up to the microphone. The room slowly quieted. Everyone turned to look at her, expecting the usual "thank you for coming" speech. But what they got was something far deeper. Zuri took a deep breath and smiled. "First," she said, her voice steady, "I want to thank my grandmother, Mama Ijoma, who always told me I was beautiful even when no one else did. I also thank my mentors and friends who helped me find myself." Then she paused, her eyes glistening. "But today, I want to speak to someone else. I want to speak to the little girl I used to be, the one who stood in front of the mirror wishing she looked different, the one who felt invisible, the one who was told she was too plain, too quiet, too dark." A hush fell over the crowd. "I want to tell her, you are not too anything. You are exactly enough. You are powerful. You are worthy. And one day, the world will see it too." People began to nod. A few hands reached for tissues. Some wiped silent tears from their cheeks. Zuri continued, "This is for every girl who's ever been made to feel like she had to shrink herself to be loved. You don't have to change to be worthy. You just have to believe that you are." There was silence for a beat. Then the room erupted in claps, cheers, and loud sobs. People stood up, some hugging strangers next to them. Even older aunties, who rarely showed emotion, were dabbing their eyes with their wrappers. Phones were already recording. Within hours, the speech would go viral, shared on blogs, Instagram, and TikTok. People would call her the bride who made the world cry. But in that moment, Zuri wasn't thinking of likes or views. She was just speaking her truth. Off to the side, Chica stood frozen. She watched as the room leaned into her sister, a woman she had always dismissed. The praise, the attention, the love. It was all going to Zuri now. Unable to bear it, Chica slipped out the back door, disappearing quietly. Their parents sat at the front table, saying nothing, not clapping, not smiling, just sitting in stunned silence. But Zuri didn't need their reaction anymore. She had already said everything that needed to be said, and the world was finally listening. Weeks after the wedding, the phone rang one quiet afternoon. Zuri sat by the window, sipping tea and watching the waves from their beachside honeymoon cottage. She glanced at the caller ID. It was her mother. Her fingers paused for a moment. Then she answered with calm grace. "Hello, Mama." she said softly. Oh, Zuri, her mother replied, her tone unusually cautious. I was just checking in. Wanted to know how you and your husband are doing. Zuri smiled, though there was no warmth in her eyes. We're doing well, thank you. A pause stretched between them. Her mother cleared her throat, as if searching for words that wouldn't come, but no apology followed. No acknowledgement of the years of hurt or the wedding sabotage. Zuri didn't push. She didn't need an apology anymore. Her peace no longer depended on it. I hope you're well, she said simply. And I forgive you, Mama, but I don't live for your approval anymore. Her mother fell quiet. Then came a stiff goodbye, and the line went dead. That evening, as the sun dipped low and golden light filled the room, Zuri's phone buzzed again. A message from Chica. It read, "Congrats on stealing the spotlight. Hope you enjoy being everyone's favorite for once." Zuri stared at the screen for a long moment, then gently set the phone aside. No reply, no reaction. She'd spent years begging for love from people who only saw her as less. That time was over. She stood and walked to the dresser, where a new photo frame sat. In it, she and Tajuddin were mid-laugh, caught in a candid moment during a boat ride. Their joy was effortless, unfiltered. Next to it stood an old, worn frame, holding a portrait of Mama Ijeoma, her smile just as bright as Zuri remembered. Zuri reached out and placed both frames side by side. One reminded her of the woman who had believed in her first. The other was the man who chose her without conditions. Between those two loves, she had found herself, and that was more than enough. The sun was warm and the sky clear as Zuri and Tajuddin walked through the dusty schoolyard of a small girls' school on the outskirts of Abuja. Laughter echoed from classrooms, and curious eyes peeked through open windows. Today wasn't about headlines or glamour. It was about giving back, about reaching the girls who felt forgotten, just like Zuri once did. They entered a hall filled with young girls in faded uniforms, sitting neatly, eyes wide as they listened to the couple speak. Zuri shared her story, not with sadness, but with strength. She talked about being overlooked, being called plain, being made to feel invisible, and how none of it defined her future. At the end of the session, the headmistress announced that Zuri and Tajuddin had sponsored full scholarships for 10 girls, giving them a chance to dream beyond their limits. The room erupted in cheers. As the event ended, one girl stayed behind. She was tiny, dark-skinned, and stood quietly at the back, holding her notebook tight to her chest. Her eyes followed Zuri like she was watching a star. Slowly, she stepped forward. Zuri noticed her and knelt down to meet her at eye level. The little girl's voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't know someone like me could be that beautiful, she said, eyes wide with wonder. Zuri's heart softened. She reached out, tucking a loose braid behind the girl's ear, and smiled gently. You already are, she said. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. The girl's face lit up with the kind of smile that only needed one moment of kindness to bloom. Zuri stood, gave her a soft hug, and watched her skip away with hope in her eyes. Later in the car, the air was quiet. Tajuddin reached over and held Zuri's hand. She looked out the window at the school fading behind them, her heart full, not with pain, but with peace. She had once been that little girl. Now, she wasn't just a bride in a pretty gown. She was a voice, a light, a symbol of what happens when you choose your own worth, even when no one else sees it. Zuri didn't just reclaim beauty, she redefined it.